Have you ever witnessed an empire crumble because of a whisper so soft only two people heard it? A handful of words that made $82 million evaporate overnight. This wasn't a scandal splashed across headlines or a boardroom explosion caught on camera. This was a silent, surgical strike that no one saw coming, except me. Because I was the one who whispered, and by the time they realized what happened, I was already gone, watching their kingdom burn from the comfort of my new corner office. My name is Lauren Pierce, and for 12 years, I built my reputation at Northbridge Dynamics, one meticulously crafted strategy at a time. At 38, I'd earned my place as Director of Strategic Planning through countless late nights, sacrificed weekends, and an unwavering commitment to excellence that even our most cynical board members couldn't ignore. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. I arrived at our glass tower in downtown Seattle at 7:15 a.m., my third cup of coffee already working its magic as I reviewed the final touches on the Helios grid presentation. Helios wasn't just another client, they were the client, a renewable energy titan with a $4.2 billion market cap, and I'd personally nurtured that relationship for 6 years. Their executives trusted me, particularly their CEO's wife, Evelyn Hart, who'd become something of a mentor over our quarterly strategy sessions. The conference room was already filling when I walked in at 9:00 a.m. sharp. My team assembled around the polished mahogany table. That's when I first noticed him, Trent Wallace, our new marketing director, hired just 3 weeks prior from some Silicon Valley startup that had burned through $50 million before imploding. He sat at what had traditionally been my spot, right hand to the CEO's chair, his perfectly white teeth gleaming as he scrolled through his phone. "Lauren." His voice boomed across the room, theatrical and hollow. Finally, I was just telling the team about my revolutionary approach to the Helios presentation. We need to completely pivot from this ancient playbook you've been running. Ancient playbook, the strategy that had grown Helios's market share by 32% over 3 years. I maintained my composure, setting my laptop down carefully. I wasn't aware we were restructuring the Helios approach. I have their board presentation in 2 weeks. That's the beautiful thing about disruption. Trent stood, his tailored suit screaming new money. It doesn't wait for permission. I've been reviewing your work, and honestly, he picked up my strategy document, the one I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, and waved it dismissively. This reads like something from 2015. All data, no vision. Where's the narrative? Where's the transformational thinking? 23 faces turned to watch my reaction, my junior analysts, who'd pulled all-nighters helping me compile that data, my project managers, who knew every number in that document could be defended in court. Even Martin from IT had stopped by to witness whatever this was. The narrative, I said quietly, is in the results. Helios doesn't pay us for transformation theater. They pay us for executable strategies that deliver measurable outcomes. Trent laughed, actually laughed, and tossed my document back onto the table, pages scattering. This is exactly the kind of thinking that's holding Northbridge back. Real leaders don't hide behind spreadsheets. Lauren, they inspire, they innovate, he paused for effect. Disrupt. The room was silent. Someone's coffee maker gurgled in the background. "I'll be taking point on Helios moving forward," he announced, as if it were already decided. "Lauren, you can support with the technical details, the boring stuff you seem to love so much." My phone buzzed, a text from my assistant. "CEO wants Trent to inject fresh perspective into key accounts. I'm sorry." I gathered my scattered documents slowly, deliberately, making eye contact with each of my team members. In their faces, I saw shock, anger, and something else, anticipation. They knew me well enough to know I didn't accept public humiliation. I didn't throw tantrums or storm out. I did something far more dangerous. I planned. "Of course, Trent," I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'll prepare all the technical details, every single one of them. I'm sure your vision will captivate everyone." As I left the conference room, I heard him already launching into a monologue about synergistic paradigm shifts and blockchain-adjacent thinking. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Evelyn Hart. Heard there's been a change in our account team. Interesting. Interesting indeed. That night, I pulled every file, every email, every piece of correspondence I'd had with Helios over 6 years. If Trent wanted to play with fire, I'd make sure he had all the matches he needed. The only thing I wouldn't give him was the knowledge of how to avoid getting burned. The game had begun, and Trent Wallace had no idea he'd already lost. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in watching incompetence masquerade as innovation. Trent had commandeered the Helios Grid presentation with the enthusiasm of a conquistador claiming new land, completely oblivious to the minefield he was walking into. "Lauren, I need you to make the slides more dynamic," he said, leaning against my office doorframe on Wednesday morning, his coffee cup reading Disruptor in bold letters. Less numbers, more vision. Think Tesla meets, Gandhi meets, I don't know, Beyoncé. I looked up from my monitor, where I was reviewing Helios's risk assessment protocols, 53 pages of technical requirements that Trent hadn't even opened. The board specifically requested our 3-year ROI projections and infrastructure cost analysis. "That's thinking small," he dismissed with a wave. "I'm talking about painting a picture of tomorrow. Smart grids that think energy that feels, we're not selling them a service, we're selling them a dream. Energy that feels," I wrote that down, word for word. By Friday, I'd watched him gut my presentation entirely, the careful financial modeling gone, the phased implementation timeline deleted, the risk mitigation strategies replaced with what he called opportunity maximization vectors, which was literally just clip art of rockets and light bulbs. But I dutifully created every slide he requested. High resolution, perfect formatting. I even added animations, the kind that would make any serious executive question our professionalism. When he asked why I was being so cooperative, I simply said, "You're the lead now. I'm just here to support your vision." He actually believed it. What Trent didn't know, what he never bothered to learn in his 3 weeks of disrupting our company, was that Helios Grid wasn't really run by CEO Richard Hart. Oh, Richard had the title, the corner office, the CNBC interviews, but the real power sat in their brownstone in Beacon Hill, managing the family trust that controlled 41% of voting shares. Evelyn Hart. I'd learned this 6 years ago. During my second meeting with Helios, Richard had been pontificating about market expansion when Evelyn, who'd been silently knitting in the corner, said quietly, "The Indonesia plan won't work. The regulatory environment is about to shift." Richard had laughed, patronizing, explaining why she was wrong. 6 months later, Indonesia's new energy regulations destroyed 3 competitor projects. Richard never questioned her again. Neither did I. Evelyn had taught me, over quiet lunches that Richard never knew about, how to read the real game being played in boardrooms. "Men like my husband," she'd once said over wine, "confuse noise with power. They think the loudest voice wins. But real power whispers, and everyone leans in to listen." Now, watching Trent practice his presentation in the glass conference room, arms flailing as he pitched to imaginary board members, I thought about Evelyn's words. He'd even hired a presentation coach, some 20-something influence consultant, who was teaching him power poses. "You're really going to let him present this?" Sarah, my senior analyst, asked quietly, standing beside me as we watched the spectacle. "Every single slide," I confirmed. "But the Helios account." "Sarah, do you remember what I taught you about the Helios quarterly reports?" She nodded slowly. "Always cross-reference with their SEC filings, because their internal reporting uses different metrics. And, oh," her eyes widened. "He doesn't know about the metric differences. He also doesn't know about their Q3 board composition change, their pending merger with Solstice Energy, or that Richard Hart has been on medical leave for 2 weeks." I turned to her. "But why would he? He's too busy disrupting to read emails." The presentation was scheduled for Thursday, 2:00 p.m. ST. Trent had insisted on flying out to Boston Wednesday night. First class, of course, to get in the zone. He'd booked a suite at the Four Seasons, expensed a $500 dinner, and posted about it all on LinkedIn with hashtags like #ThoughtLeader and #GameChanger. Meanwhile, I sent a simple email to my personal account, not my Northbridge address, with every original document, every communication, every piece of real work I'd done for Helios over the years, my insurance policy. Then I composed one last message, this time to Evelyn's personal email, the one she'd given me 3 years ago for emergencies only. Evelyn, you should know that tomorrow's presentation will not reflect the work or values we've built together over the past 6 years. I was removed from the account 3 weeks ago. The new director has chosen a different direction. I wanted you to hear this from me first. Lauren. Her response came within minutes. I appreciate your candor. I assume you weren't consulted on this change. I was informed it was necessary to inject fresh perspective. How refreshing. Will you be in the room tomorrow? No, I've been relegated to technical support, which apparently means making slides but not presenting them. There was a long pause before her next message. I see. Then we'll have to evaluate this fresh perspective on its own merits. Such a shame. Richard and I were just discussing the expansion of our strategic consulting needs, an $82 million allocation. In fact, but I suppose fresh perspectives require fresh evaluations. $82 million. I stared at the number, feeling its weight. I understand completely, I replied. I'm sure you do, dear. You always have. Thursday arrived with the kind of crisp Boston weather that made everything feel sharper, more consequential. I sat in my Seattle office, watching the clock tick toward 2:00 p.m. EST, knowing that 3,000 miles away, Trent Wallace was about to walk into a boardroom he was catastrophically unprepared for. At 1:47 p.m. STI, I sent one final text to Evelyn. Don't expect substance. I wasn't allowed to review the final content. Her response was immediate, noted. 2 words that carried the weight of a verdict. I pulled up the conference bridge Trent had grudgingly allowed me to dial in case technical questions arose. As if 6 years of relationship building could be reduced to technical support. I muted myself and listened as the meeting began. Ladies and gentlemen, Trent's voice boomed through the speaker, artificially deepened by what I recognized as his executive presence coaching. Today, we're not here to talk about energy. We're here to talk about transformation, about revolution, about the future that's already knocking at your door. Silence, the kind that makes you check if your connection dropped. Mr. Wallace, Evelyn's voice cut through, soft but precise. Before we discuss revolutions, perhaps you could address our current operational concerns, specifically the grid stabilization issues in our Northeast corridor that your firm has been managing. I could practically hear Trent's smile faltering. Of course, but I think you'll find that our visionary approach. I'm asking about the technical specifications we requested, the load balancing algorithms, the redundancy protocols. Her tone remained pleasant, conversational even. Your predecessor, Ms. Pierce, I believe always began with the fundamentals. Right, yes, the fundamentals. Paper shuffled. But see, that's old thinking. We need to move beyond algorithms and protocols. We need to think about energy as a living, breathing ecosystem. Interesting metaphor. Richard Hart's voice joined, weaker than I remembered. But ecosystems have measurable inputs and outputs. What are ours? What followed was 23 minutes of the most painful corporate theater I'd ever witnessed. Trent threw out every buzzword in his arsenal: synergy, paradigm shift, blue ocean thinking, even somehow working in cryptocurrency. Each time Evelyn or Richard asked for specifics, he pivoted to another empty concept, another slide with stock photos of wind turbines and smiling children. Mr. Wallace, Evelyn finally interrupted. Can you tell me Helios Grid's current SIDE score? System average interruption, duration index. The most basic reliability metric in our industry. I drilled it into every presentation for 6 years. The SIDE. Yes, it's rather fundamental to our operations. Surely it's in your analysis. Let me check my notes. It's 47.3 minutes. Evelyn supplied. Down from 51.7 last quarter, thanks to the preventive maintenance schedule Ms. Pierce implemented, but you'd know that if you'd reviewed her work, wouldn't you? The temperature in that Boston boardroom must have dropped 20 degrees. Also, Richard added, his voice gaining strength, I'm curious about slide 17, the one suggesting we pivot to blockchain-enabled energy trading. Are you aware we spent $12 million last year specifically to avoid cryptocurrency-related vulnerabilities in our infrastructure? My phone buzzed. Sarah. He's getting destroyed. It's actually hard to listen to. But I kept listening, every excruciating minute. Perhaps, Evelyn suggested after Trent's third attempt to explain how NFTs could revolutionize power distribution, we should discuss this fresh perspective with your leadership. This is quite a departure from the quality we've come to expect from Northbridge. No, that won't be necessary, Trent stammered. I can clarify. I think it is necessary, Evelyn cut him off. In fact, I'd like to understand how a firm we've trusted for 6 years could send someone so profoundly unprepared to present to our board. Someone who clearly hasn't even read our basic operational reports. I've read everything. Then you know about our Solstice merger. Silence. Our Q3 board restructuring. More silence. The fact that you're currently presenting to only half our board because the other half is in Singapore for our Asian expansion, which was outlined in the briefing Ms. Pierce sent 3 weeks ago. The silence stretched so long I checked my connection again. Mr. Wallace, Richard's voice was ice. Do you have anything of substance to offer? Or did you fly to Boston to waste our time with what my teenage daughter would call vibes? I think what we need, Evelyn said, and I could hear her standing, the subtle shift in audio, is a serious conversation with Northbridge leadership about whether this partnership remains viable. $82 million is a significant allocation. We need partners who respect us enough to send prepared professionals, not, she paused. Whatever this was. Mrs. Hart, please. The meeting is over. Mr. Wallace, we'll be in touch. Or rather, our lawyers will. The line went dead. My phone exploded with messages. Sarah. Holy shit, Martin from IT. Did that just happen? Even our CEO's assistant, please call me ASAP. But the only message that mattered came from Evelyn. To my personal email. Dinner tonight, 8 p.m. L'Espalier. We need to discuss your future. I looked around my office, the awards on the wall, the pictures with clients, the view I'd earned through 12 years of excellence. Then I opened my drawer and pulled out the resignation letter I'd drafted the night Trent took over the Helios account. It was time to make some edits. At 3:47 p.m. PST, Trent's assistant called. He needs you to send all Helios grid files immediately. Everything. He says it's urgent. Of course, I replied. He'll have everything he needs. And he would, every file, every document, every piece of evidence that would make it crystal clear to our CEO exactly who had built that relationship and who had destroyed it in 23 minutes of excruciating incompetence. The whisper had been sent. Now I just had to wait for the echo. L'Espalier occupied the kind of Boston real estate that whispered old money tucked into a Boylston Street brownstone. No signage, just a discreet bronze plaque that you'd miss if you didn't know to look. I'd flown out on the 5:15 p.m. flight, my own expense, knowing this dinner would determine everything that came next. Evelyn was already seated when I arrived, studying the wine list through her vintage Cartier reading glasses. She looked up, smiled, and gestured to the chair across from her. The table was in a private corner, invisible from the main dining room. Of course it was. Punctual as always, she said, setting down her glasses. I've ordered the Montrachet. I remember you appreciating it at the Henderson acquisition dinner. She remembered a wine preference from 3 years ago. This was Evelyn, every detail catalogued. Nothing forgotten. Thank you for seeing me, I began, but she raised her hand slightly. Let's not pretend this is a favor. Lauren, we're both here because we want something. The sommelier appeared, poured our wine, and vanished like smoke. That performance today was illuminating. I had no involvement in the content. I know exactly what you did and didn't do. She took a sip of wine. Considering, you sent me just enough warning to prepare, but not enough to prevent it. You wanted me to see it. The question is why. This was the moment, the chess move that would determine whether I was brilliant or unemployed. Because you deserve to know what Northbridge really thinks of the relationship we built, and because I met her eyes directly. I believe you have plans that extend beyond Northbridge's imagination. She smiled then, the kind of smile that had probably terrified boardrooms for decades. Richard is retiring, not publicly, not yet, but his health isn't improving. The board wants me to take a more active role. Congratulations. Don't congratulate me yet. I'm building something specific, a strategic consulting division, internal but independent, not managed by traditional energy executives who think innovation means painting wind turbines a different color. She paused. I need someone who understands both the technical complexity and the human dynamics, someone who can play the long game. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you the chance to build something from scratch. Your team, your methodology, your vision with Helios's resources behind you. She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. The compensation package, it's competitive. I opened it. The base salary was 40% higher than my current role. The bonus structure was aggressive. The equity participation was substantial. But it was the last line that stopped me. Initial strategic budget allocation, $82 million. The exact amount Northbridge is about to lose, I said. Poetic, isn't it? Evelyn signaled for the waiter. We'll be acquiring 2 additional energy companies this year, maybe 3. Each will need integration strategies, operational overhauls, cultural alignments, the kind of deep, substantive work you've been doing, not the performance art Mr. Wallace prefers. When would you need an answer? Oh, I already have your answer. You wouldn't have flown to Boston if you weren't ready to leave. What I need to know is who else you're bringing. She pulled out a list. These are the Northbridge people who've impressed me over the years. Sarah Chen, obviously. Marcus Thompson from your analytics team. That brilliant programmer Martin. Is it? She'd been watching, cataloging not just my work, so my people. I can't poach from Northbridge. The non-compete doesn't apply if Northbridge terminates the relationship first, which they did, rather spectacularly, at 2:23 p.m. this afternoon. She smiled. My lawyers are quite thorough. Besides, I'm not asking you to recruit them tomorrow. Take a week, let the dust settle. Let Trent Wallace try to explain to your CEO how he lost the firm's biggest client in under half an hour. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, oysters for her. Carpaccio for me. She'd ordered for both of us. Knowing my preferences, another display of control, or consideration. With Evelyn, they were the same thing. There's one condition, I said, surprising myself. Her eyebrow arched. Oh. I want Wallace to know, not immediately, but eventually. I want him to understand that his disruption was actually his destruction, and I want him to know I was the architect. Evelyn laughed, genuine, delighted. My dear, why do you think I'm structuring the announcement the way I am? Northbridge will receive our termination letter Monday morning. Tuesday, we'll announce Helios's new strategic division. Wednesday, your appointment as division head. By Thursday, Mr. Wallace will understand exactly how thoroughly he's been outplayed. And my current team will receive recruitment letters from Helios HR exactly 60 days after your start date. Standard cooling off period, generous signing bonuses, relocation packages if needed. She raised her glass. I've been planning this for 6 months. Lauren, Trent Wallace just accelerated my timeline. You were going to poach me anyway. Eventually. But watching you orchestrate this, letting Wallace hang himself with rope you provided, maintaining complete deniability while ensuring I had full visibility. She clinked her glass against mine. That wasn't just strategic thinking. That was art. We spent the next 2 hours discussing details, organizational structure, reporting lines, strategic priorities. By the time dessert arrived, we'd sketched out a 3-year plan that would fundamentally reshape how Helios approached market expansion. One last thing, Evelyn said as she signed the check. Your resignation from Northbridge. I assume it's already written. Sitting in my desk drawer? Submit it Monday morning, exactly 1 hour after our termination letter arrives. Not before we don't want to give them any warning. Not after we don't want you caught in the chaos. I nodded, understanding. The timing would make it clear I wasn't running from the disaster. I was walking towards something better. As we stood to leave, Evelyn touched my arm. Lauren, that whisper you sent this afternoon. Don't expect substance. 4 words that set everything in motion. Richard thinks the presentation failed because Wallace was incompetent. The board thinks it failed because Northbridge has lost its edge. But you and I know the truth. Which is, it failed because you decided it would, and that, my dear, is the kind of power I want on my team. The valet brought her car, a pristine 1960s Mercedes, probably worth more than most people's houses. As she drove away, I stood on Boylston Street, feeling the weight of what had just happened. In 4 days, I'd gone from being publicly humiliated to orchestrating one of the most elegant corporate reversals I'd ever seen. My phone buzzed. Trent Wallace. Urgent. Need all Helios backup materials now. CEO wants emergency meeting tomorrow. I typed back. File sent to your inbox at 3:47 p.m. Everything you need is there. And it was. Every devastating detail that would bury him. Monday morning arrived with Seattle's typical gray drizzle, the kind that made the glass towers of downtown look like they were dissolving at the edges. I arrived at Northbridge at 7:00 a.m., earlier than usual, carrying a banker's box I'd picked up from Office Depot on the way in. The office was nearly empty, just security and a few overseas traders on the 40th floor. Perfect. I had 3 hours before the termination letter would arrive. 3 hours to execute an extraction so clean it would look effortless. I started with my office, but not with the obvious things. First, I downloaded every personal file from my computer onto an encrypted drive, nothing proprietary, just the templates and frameworks I'd developed on my own time. Then I began the careful process of documenting every project I was leading, every client relationship I managed, every critical deadline approaching in the next quarter, not because I cared about Northbridge's continuity, but because I wanted it abundantly clear what they were losing. At 7:45, Sarah arrived, looking confused. You're early, and why do you have a... She stopped, seeing the box. Lauren. Close the door. She did, her face cycling through confusion to understanding to something like hope. It's happening. In approximately 2 hours, Helios Grid will terminate their contract. In 3 hours, I'll submit my resignation. In 60 days, you'll receive an offer from Helios's new strategic division. 60 days. Standard cooling off period. The offer will be 40% above your current salary, with equity participation and a signing bonus that should cover any inconvenience. I handed her a folder. Unofficial preview. Destroy after reading. Sarah opened it, her eyes widening. This is... Lauren, this is life-changing money. You've earned it. Every late night, every weekend, every time you caught something I missed. I moved to my whiteboard, covered in strategic frameworks for 7 different clients. I need you to take photos of all of this. Send them to your personal email. These are my methodologies, not Northbridge's. Won't they? By the time they think to check, it will be too busy dealing with the Helios fallout. I pulled out my personal notebooks, 12 moleskins filled with 6 years of insights. These come with me. They were never company property. Marcus Thompson appeared at my door at 8:15, laptop under his arm. Sarah texted me, said it was urgent. I gave him the same preview. His reaction was quieter than Sarah's. Just a slow nod and then, when do we burn it down? We don't burn anything. We simply leave, taking only what was already ours. Our knowledge, our relationships, our reputations. I handed him a USB drive. The Python scripts you wrote for data analysis, your personal intellectual property, developed outside work hours. How did you... I pay attention, Marcus. It's what I do. By 9:00, Word was spreading through the office that something was happening. Trent was in the CEO's office, his gesticulations visible through the glass walls. The executive assistant pool was buzzing. Martin from IT stopped by, ostensibly to check my computer, actually to whisper. The Helios letter just hit. CEO went ballistic. At 9:47, I sent my resignation email. Simple, professional, effective immediately. No explanation, no accusations, just 2 sentences and my signature. At 9:53, my desk phone rang. CEO's office. Lauren, get up here, now. The elevator ride to the 52nd floor had never felt longer. When I walked into the CEO's office, Trent was there, somehow looking both defensive and accusatory. Our CEO, James Morrison, stood behind his desk like a general surveying a battlefield loss. Explain, he said. Which part? Don't be cute. Lauren, Helios, your resignation, all of it. I sat down uninvited, crossing my legs. Helios terminated their relationship because they received a presentation that insulted their intelligence. My resignation is unrelated. I've received another opportunity. Bullshit, Trent exploded. You sabotaged me. You gave me bad information. I gave you everything. 6 years of documentation, every contact, every piece of strategic intelligence we developed. I turned to James. It's all in the files I sent Thursday at 3:47 p.m., time-stamped. With email confirmation, I believe Trent replied calling them worthless dinosaur data. James pulled up the email chain on his monitor. His face darkened as he read. You set me up, Trent insisted. I gave you exactly what you asked for. You wanted to lead, to disrupt, to transform. I simply stepped aside and let you. I stood. If there's nothing else, I have personal items to pack. You can't just leave, James said. Your non-compete doesn't prevent me from resigning, nor does it prevent me from taking a position with a company that's no longer your client. I moved toward the door. I've left detailed transition notes for all my accounts, except Helios. Of course, that transition seems to be complete. This is coordinated poaching, Trent stammered. It's conspiracy. It's business, I said, hand on the door handle. The kind with actual substance. You should try it sometime. I left them there, Trent still sputtering. James already on the phone with legal. By the time I reached my office, security was waiting standard procedure for immediate resignations. I'd already packed everything that mattered. The rest was just furniture and Northbridge's illusions about their own indispensability. As security escorted me through the lobby, I passed clusters of my colleagues, their faces a mix of shock and admiration. Sarah stood by the elevators, giving me the slightest nod. Marcus was by the coffee station, raising his cup in a subtle salute. Even Martin managed to materialize from a T, stage-whispering legend as I passed. The security guard, Rodriguez, who'd known me for 8 years, waited until we were outside to speak. Ms. Pierce, I'm supposed to collect your badge. I handed it over. Thanks for always remembering my name, Rodriguez. Ma'am, between you and me, that Trent guy is an ass. Whatever you did, he had it coming. I smiled, looking back at the Northbridge Tower one last time. Somewhere up there, James Morrison was calculating the cost of losing Helios $82 million in contracted revenue, gone. Trent Wallace was probably still trying to explain how it wasn't his fault, how he'd been sabotaged, how the system was rigged against visionaries like him. He was right about one thing: it had been sabotage, just not the kind he imagined. I hadn't fed him false information or undermined his preparation. I'd simply given him exactly what he wanted: complete control. No supervision. All the rope he needed. My phone buzzed. Evelyn, clean exit. Surgical, I replied. Excellent. Enjoy your week off. Next Monday. We build an empire. I walked to my car through the Seattle drizzle, feeling lighter with each step. Behind me, Northbridge Dynamics was about to discover what happened when you replace substance with style, expertise with ego, whispers with shouts. They were about to learn what 82 million worth of silence sounded like. The emergency board meeting was called for Monday. 2:00 p.m. Exactly 1 week after my resignation, I knew because Sarah, still embedded at Northbridge for another 53 days, had texted me a photo of the agenda. Item 1, Helios Grid Contract Termination. Item 2, Strategic Account Management Review. Item 3, Personnel Changes. Translation, public execution, damage control, and finding someone to blame. I was in Boston by then, setting up my new office at Helios headquarters, a corner suite, with a view of the harbor that made my old Northbridge view look like a parking lot. Evelyn had given me the entire 38th floor for the new strategic division, but at 2:00 p.m. PST, I wasn't thinking about office layouts. I was logged into a secure connection Sarah had provided, listening to Northbridge's death spiral in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," James Morrison's voice crackled through the connection, "we're here to address the unexpected termination of our Helios Grid contract and its implications.